Welcome, everyone. This is Climb Mode 101, and I am so excited to be joined by Cody and Victoria. Welcome.
Stoked to be here. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining.
So to kick things off, Cody and Victoria, do you want to do a quick intro?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously Cody and Victoria, and we're big time rock climbers, which is why they have us here. But most people are probably going to know us from our YouTube channel, Cody and Victoria, where we basically do mountain adventures. We get out there, we share our climbs and our backpacking trips and all sorts of stuff with the people of the internet. So, but yeah, super stoked to be here hosting this masterclass. And
Good.
yeah, that's what we do. Find us on YouTube.
Yeah, if you haven't watched their videos, they are they're really well produced. They bring you along for the journey, and they'll make you want to dust off your climbing shoes or hiking boots and just get out on the trail. So really excited to be joined by these two wonderful people who are just so incredibly passionate about getting out and getting after it. And me, my name is Matt Madick. I'm a marketing manager on the Onyx Backcountry team. I love climbing. I've been doing it for about 20 years, but it is a hobby that I feel like I ping pong back on and off on. So this is a perfect opportunity for me to brush off on some of my skills and to set some great objectives for this year for me to get after it now that all the snow has melted. So what's on the docket for today? We just started going through introductions, and then we're going to take a step back and talk a little bit about climbing in general and just some broad vocabulary terms. So as we start getting into it, it's a little more obvious for people who haven't maybe not climbed that much before to understand what we're talking about. Then we're going to go directly into the Onyx Backcountry app and start showing some routes, how to find routes that are suitable for your climbing styles and abilities, and just in general, how to orient yourself in the Onyx Backcountry app. After that, we'll go into how to get your phone oriented so you're ready for your day in the field and getting after it. And then after that, we're going to do a giveaway and a Q&A. So if you haven't downloaded Onyx Backcountry yet, now is a really good time. We have a Memorial Day sale that's running right now. We're offering 70% off Onyx Backcountry. So the QR code here will bring you to that page where you can download the app and follow along with us. And yeah, tell your friends. The 70% deal is a really good one. So now is a better time than ever to get into Onyx Backcountry. And then on that same page that I just showed, there is a giveaway that we're running. So we're giving away with this class 5 Onyx Backcountry Mountain Project hats and 5 Onyx Backcountry Elite memberships. So with those, you can either get a card to give to a friend, or if you're like, hey, I have premium or I have a free account, I can just upgrade you for that one. So we're giving away 5 Elite memberships. And yeah, you can share them with a climbing buddy or upgrade yourself. So make sure you enter. So the way you enter on this thing is there's a form after you create your account, or if you need to log into it at the bottom of the page, just log into your Onyx account and then fill out the form there. And we're going to draw winners at the end of this class. So make sure you get in there. All right, so just taking a step back to talk about Onyx Backcountry in general. So Onyx Backcountry is a GPS mapping app for rock climbing, mountain biking, backpacking, hiking, backcountry skiing, and kind of all the activities that I like to do. So as we're continuing to expand the app and to really enhance these experiences, we always are putting these 2 principles on our forefront, which is to, navigate and to advocate. So our goal is to provide tools for people to get after it, to explore, but also to advocate for responsible recreation, for sustainable recreation, for making more informed decisions, and for being stewards for public land advocacy. So this is something we're incredibly passionate with. And if you, are working with a local climbing organization or one of the more national ones, we'd love to hear from you and to work closely with you to help make our app as good as it can be in your local area with the access issues and whatever else is going on in your world. So reach out to us. And what's new for us right now is the climb mode. So in the fall of last year, we have added climbing and mountain biking into the Onyx Backcountry app. So the main integration that we've added with these for climb mode is the mountain project integration. So you can access the extensive database of climbing routes, ratings, descriptions, photos, and user reviews directly from Mountain Project, which is an app that I know and love, and I know everyone on this call has probably used quite extensively over their experiences climbing. And the main differentiator between the Mountain Project experience and the Onyx Backcountry experience, which we'll show in great detail, is really just the map quality being leveled up substantially. So have you ever been lost trying to find a crag? I know I have. So
Like every month.
yeah, like all the time. So
Yeah.
the goal with integrating this is just really adding a better, more robust experience for climbers, and adding a different way to like approach and discover and figure out where climbing routes are and how to access them, as well as pairing them with information like the public lands information, knowing what kind of land it is, whether it's BLM land, private land, or or public land of any type, and just making sure you know where you stand at all times. And then also including robust like route building tools, so you can really customize your approach to the crag. You can set waypoints. You can really dial in your process for where you're going and what you're doing. So it's there for you when you're lost with all your climbing gear on your back. So we're going to take a quick step back and talk about climbing 101. So how do I start climbing? Cody and Victoria, how did you start climbing?
Well, actually, a friend of ours just needed a belayer, so he invited us to go, and we never climbed before. And we're like, oh, well, what kind of shoes should we wear? And he's like, oh, we'll just wear your hiking shoes. It'll be fine.
So that was our
That's our
first
introduction to
intro to
climbing.
climbing. But yeah, then like somebody randomly gave us a box of old climbing gear. They were actually moving to Hawaii, and so they were like, I'm not really gonna need this stuff anymore. So they gave us a bunch of this old like 90s climbing gear. And
We just figured that we'd just
yeah, we're like, I guess we'll try to learn how to go rock climbing. So we actually taught ourselves, which maybe isn't what I would recommend to now that I know what I know. But yeah, we read a bunch of books, watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and took it super slow. So yeah, it took us a really long time to get into climbing because we were very intentional and very careful. But yeah, it all started with a box of 90s climbing gear that maybe wasn't super bomber, but
it was super good enough.
it worked for like a month until we were able to get our own gear. So
that's a proper like dirt bag introduction into the sport.
Yeah.
Like getting the dirty, smelly box from your friend with all the climb gear you need. And that kind of touches on like a lot of the different ways you can get into it, and the importance for advocacy and like and mentorship. So like now that if you're climbing, you have experience, or if you're just getting into it, like the partner aspect of this is like the challenging part, is like finding a consistent partner. I mean, you guys have like a built-in one with your relationship.
yeah, we're very fortunate, yes.
But like finding those people, or even when you're an experienced climber, like being on the lookout for those people who need stewardship. So if you see someone at the crag, like it's one of the important things to just like extend the olive branch, and teach somebody something, or just be friendly. And that's how we can continue to keep this community really like robust and passionate.
True. Yeah.
My intro into climbing was, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and there was like a climbing gym, next to the high school that I went to. So like, I remember going there for like birthday parties when I was like really young, and then in high school, like having a friend who got really into climbing there. And I think the gym is a really good place to start as well. So you can focus on like the physical elements of climbing. And it's another really good place to like get more established with, climbing community. It's also a really good place to meet climbing partners.
Totally,
Yes,
yeah.
And
100%.
a lot of gyms nowadays too are focusing on creating programs where it's like, hey, you climb here all the time, and we are leading these trips to go outside.
Right.
And I think that's a really good place to start as well. So there's a really good place to find your community. If you don't have it, or if you've moved to somewhere new and you're looking for partners, and it's a really good way to get into the sport. And then, as always, like a lot of information on YouTube. There's a lot of self-teaching you can do. There's mentorship, but then there's also like, there's no shame in hiring a guide and having.
Totally.
They'll teach you the right way to do things. Where I think when I got into climbing, there was a couple people that were like, "You do it this way," and then I went out climbing with other people like, "Why are you doing it that way?"
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah. So I mean, as processes change too, like it's good to always like also be ready to change your process to like the up-to-date safe things. So
I think you'll see better progress overall by hiring a guide, probably more than anything else. we probably would be climbing a lot harder than we do now had we not taught ourselves in the beginning, you
Or
know?
if we started in the gym first. Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Cool. All right, well, we're going to go over a little bit of vocabulary just to make some of the other parts in this presentation a little bit more understandable. So there are several disciplines of climbing, and the three that we're going to focus on today are sport climbing, bouldering, and trad or traditional climbing. So brief overview of what sport climbing is sport climbing relies on permanent fixed anchors to the rock for protection. And sport climbers use pre-placed bolts to secure themselves as they ascend. So what does this mean? This generally means that you can kind of see them in this picture a little bit, is that they're like these metal bolts in the wall that you clip into as you're climbing up the route. Anything I'm missing on the sport, Cody and Victoria?
No, I think that's about it. I think maybe if you have no idea about it at all, it can be a little confusing. You're like, what? There's just bolts in the wall, but literally, like, yes, somebody has gone there and they've established this as a climbing route, and they've drilled bolts into the wall that are typically safe. You know, you do want to make sure, but most established climbing areas, they're going to be safe.
Yeah, and there's like we'll go into a little bit with like the mountain project content where that's the beauty of like a lot of that content is people being like, hey, you know, like 5 bolts up, this one like spins or it's rusty or like
Right.
whatever. And there's a lot of information that you can gather from there just to like alert you of hazards before you're 50 feet off the ground.
Definitely. Yeah.
So yeah, like sport climbing too is a great way to like to start, you know, getting into the sport a little bit more. And it just gives you a little bit more of like a stable footing so you can focus more on the physical elements of it. So the essential gear for sport climbing is climbing shoes, harness, ropes, quick draws, a belay device, which is a gree or an ATC. There's a couple others, but those are the main ones. You guys use anything different?
Nope,
Nope,
agree.
that's it.
Yeah, I like grease too. Helmet, chalk bag, and a personal anchor system is kind of my go-to list. Anything you guys have on your essential sport list?
A tether, personal tether, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, he has an anchor system on there,
Yep,
so
you're good.
yeah, I mean, that's about it.
Sweet. And the main way to evaluate the difficulty of these climbs is through the Yosemite decimal system. And that's predominantly the rating system that's used in North America that rates the different levels of climb. So generally what you'll see, and as we're going through the Onyx app and showing these ratings in the app, your 5 to 5.4 is easy climbing with large holds, generally suitable for beginners. When you get into the 5.5s to 5.8s, that's more intermediate with smaller holds and more technical moves. From 5.9 to 5.11, that's advanced climbing with small, challenging holds and overhangs. And then once you get above that into the 5.12s and beyond, that's expert climbing with very difficult moves, requiring exceptional strength, technique, and endurance. And then with these two, you'll also see subgrades. So you'll see like 5.11 A's, B's, C's, D's, and those kind of like are like subcategories within these ratings that kind of like give a little bit more flexibility within them, as well as suffixes such as like 5.11 or 5.9 plus or 5.11 minus. Anything else to add, Cody and Victoria?
No, I think
You
that's
got
it. I
it.
think as far as the subgrades, I mean, it pretty much starts at 5.10 typically is when you start to see A, B, C, and D.
Yeah. And then
But,
the thing with these two is like you'll find, and again, like the mountain project comments, that like sometimes these ratings can be a little subjective.
Yes.
And I've sometimes gotten on a climb and I'm like, man, that was a hard 5.9, and other people are like that was a 5.6. What are you talking about? So like there is a refined system for it, but I think climbing is always going to be a little subjective as well. So
Yeah. Yeah.
all right, the next one we're going to talk about is bouldering. So bouldering is a form of rock climbing that involves climbing short but challenging routes known as problems without the use of ropes or harnesses. So the essential gear for this one's a little bit less. Generally, you just need climbing shoes, a crash pad, and chalk bag. And as you continue to progress in the sport, like you're going to need more like brushes and maybe a whole ton of pads to make sure that you're protected from a larger fall, especially if you're climbing up in Bishop on some of the high ball boulders that are up there. But yeah, like generally what I look for when I'm bouldering is just like challenging routes that are shorter. So it's like a less of like I'm trying to get up the wall and more of like I'm trying to get on top of this rock. So like especially with gym bouldering, it's a lot of more technical climbing, but much shorter distances. So the bouldering problems use their own difficulty scale, known as the V scale. So 5 to 5, 4. Oh, this is actually, I copied the wrong thing, but they use a V system. So you'll see V0 is like easy climbing. Like V1 to 2 is more difficult. V3 to 4 is more challenging than that. So like the V scale just like goes up as well, like similar to the Yosemite scale, with the different grades as you progress in that. So we'll go over some examples of that as we touch into bouldering as well. So, and then traditional climbing or trad climbing is a style of rock climbing where climbers place their own protective gear into the rock as they ascend. Trad climbers use removable gear to protect against falls. And this style emphasizes self-reliance, route finding skills, and a deeper connection to the climbing environment. So with this, you're going to need a lot more gear. You can see Victoria holding her rack right here with all the different cams and hexes and quick draws and everything in it. So yeah, like from when you're trying to level up into the traditional climbing, like what's your kind of like entry point? Like what do you look for when you're starting to like think about, hey, am I ready for trad?
That's a good question.
Well, you definitely should have led a lot of sport climbing routes just to understand like how to clip your draws and just understand how the whole leading system works.
Yeah.
Once you feel comfortable with that, then
Yeah,
start plugging gear.
Once you're comfortable climbing sport climbs and climbing hard and getting used to things like exposure and different things like that, yeah, I think you can start thinking about getting into trad climbing, and that would probably be a good time to consider either a really good mentor who's been doing it for a really long time or hiring a guide, because you are placing your own protection. And so there's a proper way to place it. And if you don't place it the proper way, it could end up coming out, which obviously could end up being very dangerous. So I do think climbing gets a lot more dangerous when you start climbing trad, but I think we would also agree it kind of gets a lot more fun when you start climbing trad too. So
yeah, I haven't fully bridged the gap with being a competent trad climber yet. So like I'm excited to learn more of that from you. And yeah, like my entry point into it is a little bit of like starting to approach the mixed routes. So like in Mountain Project and on our app, you'll see some areas where it's like it's considered a mixed route, where it's like there's a handful of bolts, and then there'll be like a move or two where you have to place gear. And that's always kind of like a good place to warm yourself up into that as well.
Yeah, definitely recommend placing gear on the ground first before you're climbing.
Yes. Yes.
But I agree. Having the safety, knowing like, oh, there's a bolt down there below me that's bomber and it's going to catch me.
Yeah.
Will make you feel a little better when you go placing that gear. So
sweet. Cool. All right, now we're going to jump into the Onyx Backcountry app. So I'm going to change my screen here. So I'm going to start really high level. I'm sure a handful of you have never been in the Onyx Backcountry app, so I want to make sure that I'm not glazing over any of that as well. But I'm going to start in the top left here and just go over the first thing that I like to do is utilize the search functionality. You can search for basically anything in here. You can search for like a street address. You can put GPS coordinates in here. You can search for a peak or a town or basically anything that can come to your head. So like for this example, like we're going to be talking pretty heavily about Moab. So bam, we're in the town of Moab. So this is always a really good place, I think, to start. And if you know what you're looking for, to just make the map jump to exactly where you're going. So if you've heard of a climb, you can search for it. If you want to look for a hiking trail, you can do that. If you've even heard of a campsite, like we have campsite icons in here as well. So really good place to start if you already kind of have an idea of where you're going, or at least just want to jump to where you're going to go. The next major section is the activity selector. So this is going to be really important if you're in the app and you're like, hey, I heard there's climbing routes in here and I'm not seeing them. That's because you need to make sure you're in the proper activity mode. So again, there's these 4 activity modes. There's hike, mountain bike, ski tour, and climb. I'll kind of like zoom out a little bit so you can see a little bit of it. Is hike mode, shows hiking trails. And if we switch to mountain bike mode, it changes and shows you all the mountain bike trails in the area. Ski tour, we'll switch it to the skiing area, and there's some stuff in those LaSalle's and some of the data from my trip there earlier. And then we also have climb mode, which is the one we're going to predominantly talk about in our class today. So you can see like these icons have started to appear and just show a handful of these different regions that we can dive into more in a second. We have a handful of tools over here that we'll be using during the class as well. So I'll just show them in the town of Moab since we're focused on it. But this route builder is my favorite tool that we have because this allows you to draw a line that will snap to or deviate from existing trail networks or roads or bike paths. So you can get a better estimate on your distance, your elevation, everything like that. So I'm just going to start in the middle of town. If you start like zigzagging around, you can see it's like kind of following routes. And if you click along the way, it can actually help it like actually snap to where you want it to go a little bit better. And then we're not gaining much elevation because we're in flat town, but like, let's say you want to go rogue, you want to go off of the trail, you can switch to a point draw system and just really make it wherever you want to go. So I love this. You can actually save these and share them with your friends. So we'll be doing a little bit of that in the class as well. And just really get everyone on the same page with like exactly what we're doing and where we're going. I'm going to cancel that one. We also have a line tool. So if you just want to know like distance between two objects, you can do that. Or if you want to kind of like dogleg it a little bit, you can do that as well. And then waypoints are also like a really important thing for me. Like I'm kind of like an obsessive planner, especially when I'm sharing with my friends where it's like, I'll drop a pin and say, this is exactly where we're going to meet in the morning. This is the parking area. This is where we're, going. Here's this waterfall that I want to check out. Here's where the climb is. I get pretty wild with my waypoints just to make sure that everything's in front of you. And you can add photos to these waypoints as well. So you have like a visual representation of like, to reference when you look back. All right, the next section we're going to touch on is just the layers. Those can be found over here in the bottom right corner of the app. And I'll just go over quickly like a handful of the different features in here. So this is where you can select between your topo, your hybrid, and your satellite. So if you're in topo, you get a traditional topo map with the lines. If you're in hybrid, it shows both satellite imagery, but it also has those elevation bands as well. And then satellite is pure rock view. So we also have, if you're an Onyx Backcountry Elite member, this is kind of what Onyx is known for, is our private land data, which has fundamentally changed the way I see the world, because you can see not only where the boundaries are with private land, but who owns that land. So it really has opened my eyes, like, especially when you're out wandering around, you're like, am I where I'm supposed to be? Am I like in someone's backyard? Am I going to get chased out of here with a shotgun? And with this layer, you really like, you kind of have no excuse to trespass. So I love this layer. And yeah, if you're an Onyx Backcountry Elite member, this is one of the main things that you get with that. In conjunction with that, we have a government land layer. This is a really great layer for the same reason. And like, you can actually see a lot of these boundaries, even if you don't have Elite. So you can still see like where BLM land begins, where wilderness areas are, where national forest or national park land begins. Where is Arches? Where are we? So you can actually see like in all these areas, like what kind of land am I looking at? And one of the things too is like whether you're in the app or on the desktop, if you just click at any point, you can actually see like, okay, this is government land, this is a state trust land. So you can actually like really drill down, and like if you're never sure, you can just click the map and know exactly what you're looking at. So this is totally one of my favorite things about Onyx, is just these layers and just knowing exactly like what kind of areas you're in. We also have like slope angle and slope aspect layers. These are really useful for backcountry skiing, as well as like these avalanche forecast layers. These are all for backcountry skiing and stuff like that. But we also have active wildfires. So if you're in an area that's prone to wildfires, you can see where they actually are in fairly real time when the government sources update. Smoke, air quality layers, as well as like historic wildfires, like where are these burn areas, like what was on fire 2 years ago that is now just kind of scorched earth and down trees if you go out there. And then cool, I think that's all I really wanted to go over to initially orient everybody with Onyx. Further on in the presentation, I'm going to show how to get your phone ready for in the field and how to download offline maps and everything like that. So we'll be going over that in the future. But cool, let's start getting into like how to find rock climbing routes. So Cody and Victoria, we are going on a fictional trip together to Moab. One of my favorite places. And if you haven't been to Moab, Utah before, it is just fantastic. Whether you like mountain biking, rock climbing, off-roading, getting
Base
in the
jumping.
river, you can do everything. I went skiing there this year. That was
Uh,
fantastic. You can literally do it all there. So I encourage everyone to go there and to just explore what it has to offer. So it's a very large place. So like Cody and Victoria, like when you're starting to look at these areas, like how do you start looking for climbing routes and how do you really just start that process?
yeah. So probably the first thing we would do, knowing like we're going into Moab, would be, depending if we have a climb in mind, I'll just type it straight in. Otherwise, usually we'll go over to Mountain Project and pull up the filters, and then we can start looking at climbs that are in our range, right? Because we're not looking for anything that's like 1 star or like a bomb. We're looking for really good routes, but if we've never been to the area before, it's nice to use the filters. Yeah, perfect. You got it pulled up right there. But
This is
then we
this
can go in and like filter, I'm looking for a climb that's 3 or more stars, that's between 5'9" and 5'11. And then we can find the routes there. And yeah, perfect. And then once we find it, we'll go, click on the climbs that look relatively good, that have, decent star ratings, and then we can pull them up over on Onyx with the explore this route in 3D option.
Yeah. Which
Um,
well, we'll go through that right now. So like yeah, I want to showcase too like the interconnectivity between these two platforms right now. I've been using Mountain Project a lot as like a guide, as like thinking of it like as carrying like the guidebook, right? And like being able to like look through routes and then using Onyx to like really hone in on them too. So like the filtering and like the discovery is really good in Mountain Project. So like I often will use both. And I'll also show like in Onyx how to like discover routes as well. But this is a really good place to start. So like in Mountain Project, you can actually like take a look at the total climbs. This is a whole Southeast Utah area. And then as we were saying earlier, it's like you can select, what type of climbing are we looking for? So is it and here you can choose between rock boulder, ice mixed. I think we're going to focus on rock. And then, traditional and sport, most likely. We'll probably take top rope out here. I'm not sure there's too much top roping in Moab. And then in terms of quality, right? Like there's like quality ratings associated with climbs, and those are pretty subjective, but they're also to key you in on like the quality of the route. And if people are like, hey, I did that and it was pretty loose rock, or not a great climb, and it can steer you in the direction of more classic, like better climbs, and give you kind of an idea of just the overall condition. So for you, you said we should do like 3 or 4
That's where
or
I
like
would start. And then, I'm like, when I'm first going to an area, I'm like, okay, let's go check out some of the classics, right? And then after that, we'll kind of start venturing into maybe some of the stuff that is a little chossy but fun or whatever. But I want to know, like, what do the locals think are the best climbs?
yeah, cool. And then yeah, like with this one, we talked a little bit about pitches earlier, but like, with rock climbing and sport climbing, there's typically like single pitch climbs and then multi-pitch climbs, which are, you know, you're basically climbing one sport route and then you're climbing another sport or trad route. And that's basically what you're looking for here. So like if we were like, hey, we're not really looking to get on any multi-pitch climbing right now, we're going to start with just like looking for a single pitch route. That's how you can filter that there. And then we're going to sort by popularity and difficulty and see what it comes up with. So yeah, there's just like an overwhelming number of climbs in Moab. So having these filters is just a really good way to like to figure out like what is more like in your skill level, what's in your range, what do you want to do? Do any of these stand out? Do you want to take a look at and just pull into Mountain Pride or Onyx real quick?
Incredible hand crack.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's go. Let's do Flakes of Wrath because I've actually climbed it. It's 5'9" plus. Maybe, yeah, there you go.
I see it.
Yeah, so that's another thing that we're looking at when we're first going to an area, right? Is like, let's start with something on the lower end of our range because different areas are going to be either harder or easier from what you're usually climbing. So it's nice, like, okay, I climb 5'9" pretty easily at home. Let's start with a 5'9" here in Moab and see, like, is it harder than what I'm used to, or is it easier than what I'm used to?
Yeah, that's a really good call as well. So like you know, if you're familiar with Mountain Project, you've seen a lot of this stuff. I want to show you just how easy it is. Like if you have like a tick list in your Mountain Project app that you can just like, you know, if you're on one of these pages, you can kind of instantly just jump over here and open these cards directly in Onyx, which is a really great way, I think, to just like take what you know and just like, you know, utilize this in the app in Onyx Backcountry as well. So, yeah, let's take a look at this card. This Flakes of Wrath is in this Wall Street area. So this is like the name of the crag. And as we're getting in here, oh, I forgot to mention, like, if you're on your computer and you want to see this 3D view, there's this button here, which will switch you from 2D to 3D. And then if you really want to get down and pitch and zoom and like lower your point of view, you just got to hold Control on here. And that way you can get a really good perspective of the area, and you can really just like see these areas in 3D and just get really excited for the climb to come. So yeah, Wall Street's a really classic spot. If you've been to Moab and have driven down this road, I've seen people belaying from the inside of a convertible on this section. There's no approach. It is literally on the side of the, it's a wall on the street. So that's why they call it Wall Street. So,
Yep.
yeah, and I think this one is like a cool one to look at. So, you know, initially looking at this too, you know, we're looking at, it's a trad route. So we know that, you know, if we're looking for sport routes, this isn't exactly on our list. And you can see a lot of information too about access issues. So there's two that show up here, and it's always great to have these as just your red alert. So if you're in the desert, climbing on sandstone in the rain or when the rock is wet is very frowned upon because it damages the rock. And I just love that we put this front and center when you're looking at this in Onyx, as well as a poop alert. So it's always funny because like there are these like little things where it's just like nobody wants to go and show up in another area and be doing things that are taboo or like continue to contribute to like access issues and overcrowding and everything like that. It's like having these like, even if they're silly, like a poop alert, it's really cool to see them in Onyx. So and it even gives you suggestions on where to find a actual bathroom. So and then, yeah, within these cards as well, you can see all the photos you'd expect from Mountain Project. You can see your descriptions. And then you can see like individual comments about the routes as well. So these are all pulled from Mountain Project comments as well. So you can see all that beta that you've come to expect directly in the Onyx Backcountry app. Yeah, so that's kind of like, if you're familiar with Mountain Project, how to back into using Onyx. If you're already familiar with that and you already have like a tick list, an idea, or if you just don't have an idea and you really want to get down to filtering, I'll show how to do that in Mountain Project a little bit, or in Onyx a little bit more. And like one of the ways too, like when I show up in an area, I don't know about you guys, but I'm the kind of guy who will often just like look at a place and like look at every nook and cranny. So like I really like just looking around and just clicking and interacting with these different icons. And that's where you can start getting like number of sport, number of rock routes, and really just like getting acquainted with the area. And figuring out like, where am I going to camp while I'm here? You know, where can I find a campsite that's close to where I'm, you know, looking to climb? And then that can help you like plan and organize your weekend if you're going out. The other way you can get into it is this Discover section. So with this Discover section, the way it currently works is we're pulling in, you kind of have to like back into your routes a little bit, but you know, we know we're going to go climb in Utah. And then it gives you all the stats for like all the different routes, all the sub areas, rock, ice, boulder, etc. Then we're going to go into the different areas. So this is Southeast Utah, and it just pulls you even closer. You can see these like icons on the map actually start to get a little bit more pronounced. And then we look at areas, and like this is often like when I know what I'm looking for, a good place for me to start and just start looking at, you know, these different climbing areas. And I think like where, you know, it also gives you like on the surface here, like, okay, there's a lot of like standard rock climbing routes. You know, if you're looking for like sport routes versus trad or like bouldering. So I'm going to look for, where is it? We were going to talk about a specific area. Now I'm lost. But I know where it is on the map, so we'll go in that way. Wait, where is it? So yeah, like one of the things like I like to do when I show up for climbing is to start with some warm-up sport routes, especially like a lot of my trips to Moab are in the spring and it's like I haven't climbed in a while. Want to make sure that I have my processes dialed. So there's an area down here that I like to go to in the beginning of the year, most years, called the Ice Cream Parlor. So now I'm gonna look at this too. Okay, it is Cane Springs. Okay. So now going into here from there, if you're in here and you kind of like have looked around here, Cane Springs is the area that we'd be looking for in this way. That's the campground. Yeah, either way. And then once you're in here, like you can start accessing like the photos. So like this is another area like where the photos and Mountain Project are just so valuable. Is like a lot of people have these awesome like hand-drawn pictures of the crag, and they are kind of like marking out like where anchors are and where climbs start and kind of like what you're looking for, as well as just giving you like a better, like this guy physically pointing at the crag for his picture. And then once you get in here, you can start evaluating routes. So like Cody and Victoria, like let's say like you're dragging me up. I want to do like a pretty mellow sport climb to start. Like when you're in this view, like what is your general principle if we're going to look for like a general sport route here?
You're talking in the route finder that you're on there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, kind of same deal, like 2, 3, or 4 stars, especially if I'm taking somebody up that I've never climbed with before. Probably looking like 5'7", 5'8". Again, just to like get a feel of the area, like get a feel of how well you climb and how you handle the area. So I'm actually on the same page that you're on here too. Looks like there's a couple left slab, black slab. They're both sport climbs. They're only 50 feet tall, so they're not too big. That would kind of be something that I'm looking at, right? Is like just an easy warm up that's going to be relatively chill, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, and with these, I've climbed these routes before, and they are like pretty good place to start. They're fairly short. They're pretty straightforward. They're a little slabby, but they're like a great kind of way to like get the cobwebs off and make sure you remember how to tie your knots and to remember how to rock climb. So like this is always a really good way. Just like looking at a crag in general, and when you're evaluating it, is I look for like diversity a lot when I'm looking in here and just saying like, there's a handful of routes in this wall. Like, do they actually meet the criteria? Like, if I go there, am I going to have multiple options that are
Right.
in my range? Versus like sometimes you show up to a wall and you're like, okay, I really want to climb that 5'7" to start. And if I don't get, if that one's busy or if there's a bunch of other people trying to climb it, there's not really any other options for me to do. Or there's not like that progression where you're like, I started in the 7, now I'm ready for an 8, then I'm ready for a 9.
Right.
Like that's a lot of times when I'm evaluating a crag and going there, just feeling is there enough here that I'm gonna like make it worth my while to come here?
Yeah.
Totally.
Cool. I think I'm gonna jump over to just talking a little bit about bouldering really quick. So it's we'll just pick out a random boulder here. So like Boulder House, no. Sorry, I had this one. So as you can see, like sometimes the Mountain Project I think is a little bit better for discovery initially. So actually I'll go in there right now. We'll do this again. So like we're going to be in Utah. We're going to change our filters and we're going to look for a bouldering route, right? And I'm pretty okay at bouldering. So like I'm going to look for something under V2 and that'll show us stuff like in this area for like potential boulders that we're going to want to hit. So we'll look at this one. I'm going to start with like a V0. Moab Rim Trail Boulders has a handful of good ones. And then we're going to jump back into the Onyx Backcountry app and get that information. So yeah, like as you can see, like that's another way that I really like to jump into Onyx is just like using the discovery experience in Mountain Project because it's just so good. So yeah, again, like we're looking at the boulders rating. So like V0 is a fairly straightforward route in a lot of places. I have also been shut down by V0s and V1s in certain areas. So it's always fun to just like see different styles of climbing. Like this guy is like doing an invert. So like, just keeping an eye on these, looking at these, reading the descriptions and just like getting a little bit better beta on like where you're going before you make the drive, I think is like often like a lot of what I like to do. So yeah. And with bouldering too, it's just making sure you have your crash pad. Your gear requirements are a little bit less, but I also like bouldering a little bit because sometimes you don't need a partner to do it if you're doing some mellow stuff as well. So
True.
cool. And then like the next thing I wanted to go over was like, and Cody and Victoria and I have talked about this a little bit, is just like those dream lines, right? So like if you've ever been to Moab, there's this huge spire that is just towering above the skyline. And every time I go to Moab, I always look at it like longingly. And I know you guys have had that experience too. So we're going to be talking about Castleton Tower. Um, what drew you to Castleton Tower when you first came to?
So what was it? Last fall, we went to Moab for basically a desert tower mission. So we had a couple of towers in mind that we wanted to climb, and we actually climbed Fisher Towers, which is a little bit more east or something of Castleton Tower. But we climbed that, and then we saw Castleton Tower in the distance. We're like, wait, like, can you climb that thing? Like, can we get to the top of that? Because that thing looks sick. So that's kind of like where the dream started for Castleton Tower.
Yeah, I think kind of a lot of our climbs start like that, whether it's like a big mountain or just a big wall off in the distance. Like a lot of times we're just driving, down the highway and you see something that looks climbable. And so we'll just like pull up Onyx and see like, is there one of those little climbing logos on that wall? And if there is, we can click on it and see what the routes are and everything like that. So that's kind of what happened for us with Castleton, is like we were on this towers mission. We knew like ancient art is over in the Fisher Towers area, which is like a world-class tower that just is really unique and amazing. But as we were on our way driving out there, we see Castleton Tower in the distance. And so it's like, can you climb that? Like, are there any climbs on that? And so, yeah, we pulled it up on Onyx, and turns out there was some climbs that were pretty hard, and we were kind of scared of it, to be honest, at first. But yeah, that's a lot of times that's how we're, finding these mega climbs. It's just like seeing something that looks epic and, going in to check it out. So
Yeah, and I like love that like objective based climbing, because there's a lot of things, whether it be, you're watching videos of people climbing, in Yosemite or, in Moab or whatever, and you're kind of just like, man, like I'm not there yet, but how do I get there? And I think like that's like kind of where we're going to go with the rest of this presentation, is just talking about like, even if you're not ready, like how do you start wrapping your head around like, how the heck do you do something like this?
Mhm.
So yeah, how about you walk us through like, your general like practice, and like in general, like to like looking at one of these cards and really just starting to like figure out all the logistics and all the pieces of it.
yeah, for sure. If you want, I can share my screen and then kind of walk you through what I have going on over here.
Let's do it.
Let's see. Cool. So hopefully you can see what I'm working with here now.
I can see it. Yeah.
So yeah, this here is Castleton Tower. And originally, so we were off in the distance here climbing. This is the Fisher Towers area, which would be like ancient art is the classic. I've actually already waypointed like, some photos that we took from our trip and stuff like that. So that's one of the features that I really like to use on here. So like this is a photo that Victoria and I took from basically the parking lot for this ancient art trailhead, or the Fisher Towers trailhead. But yeah, so we were over here climbing, where you can see I've also waypointed the climb itself with this carabiner logo. So we were climbing up there, but we could see off in the distance, if I can show you, Castleton is back here. So we could actually see that from where we were climbing, and we're like, okay, so this ancient art climb went well. Like, can we get on top of this tower? So that's when we start digging in, we come over here and basically realize that there are climbs here based on this climbing logo. That's my waypoint that I've clicked on there. But this is a photo of the tower. This is Castleton Tower, again, that I've uploaded with a waypoint. But yeah, when we're starting to like think about these climbs, the first thing I'm doing is just digging in here, looking is there climbs, is there routes that we could do? So yeah, which there are, we can climb 5'9", 5'10". So that's kind of the first thing I'm looking for is like, is there something there that I can even do? Otherwise, there's no point even looking into it. But yeah, after that, you know, we kind of figure out like, yeah, there is something. That's when we'll start digging into like the nitty gritty details, right? Which is where this overview tab really comes in handy.
Yeah.
So yeah, you touched on some of the stuff already, but the first thing we're always looking at is these like access issues and stuff at the top here. Obviously in Moab or anywhere that's like sandstone, if it's wet, you can't go climb. You're not allowed to go climb because the rock gets so fragile. So that's like one of the first things we're looking at is like closures or if there's any, you know, rain potential or things like that. And then this one here, so you're actually staying at a campground typically to climb this because it's kind of a big day. So yeah, the campground is at the trail head, which is perfect. You just park and sleep right at the trailhead. And yeah, so you can camp right here. I also have a photo of that. So yeah, this is kind of what the campground looks like. It's not very flat. It's not very comfortable, but it puts you right next to the tower. So yeah, so that's kind of what we're looking into is like, where do you camp? Where can you climb? Different things like that. And let me pull Castleton back up. Oh, sorry. Castleton. But yeah, so that's kind of the first thing we're going to be looking at is like the routes, the overview, like what are the warnings and things that people are telling you. And then obviously just like reading the beta, right? Like what's the approach like? What's the climb like? This just gives you an overview of like the tower itself. You know, Castleton Tower is probably the most famous desert tower in the world. Funny story, they actually shot like a car commercial up there, which is pretty crazy. Way back in the day when you could get away with anything.
Definitely worth a watch.
So
It's a funny video. It's like from the 50s. So
it's probably on YouTube, right? You could probably just Google like Castleton Tower commercial.
yeah, actually, I'll link on
Um,
here. It's funny.
but yeah, it's super cool. So it is a, you know, it's a world-class classic tower. But yeah, we'll just read the overview, kind of get some information. This will tell you like exactly how to get there. You know, you'll find the campground on Castle Valley Road. Tells you about the approach, which takes about an hour, but it is strenuous. So these are all like good things to know, you know, it's like how hard is the approach and where can you camp? Where can you park? A lot of times, like parking is kind of contrived, but if you can't find it in here, a lot of times you can find it in the comments. You know, people love to give you tons of beta, like this guy, Benjamin, just recently in May, is like giving a ton of information here about the open lands and the campground and all that stuff. So yeah, we basically just peruse through here, make sure we know all the information, check out some of the photos, things like that. And then that's where we'll start like digging into the nitty gritty of the actual climbing route, basically. So for us, we actually made a video and we climbed this route called Core Ingalls, which is, I mean, super world-class, like super hard, technical, just amazing tower climb. Yeah, that's super cool. So we just start digging in there again, looking at like the information. Obviously, we know it's a trad climb. Most towers are going to be trad. For me, like one of the most important things I'm worried about is the description, obviously, with like what are the pitches like and stuff like that. The description, as well as getting down. Obviously, I already know where the location is, but the trail is right there on Onyx. It's pretty obvious. And then the descent information too. It's like, how do you get off of this thing, right? Because you're going to be standing up there on a tower. Like you don't just walk down. So yeah, I'm definitely going to read into the descent information too. So all this information, honestly, is super useful. Another one that's really important when you're trad climbing is like, what gear do you need to bring? Like what rack do you need to bring? And this is going to tell you like exactly, if you're a little squeamish, you could bring Big Bros number 5 or number 6. But a standard rack on this route to number 4 works fine. So, which is what we brought, and it was perfect. So
We brought
actually, I
number
think
5.
we brought a number 5.
Yeah.
To be fair, maybe we were a little squeamish. But yeah, so that's all the information that we're kind of looking into. You know, you have a full pitch by pitch breakdown here. You were talking earlier about pitches. So this climb is 4 pitches, which means you're like, you go up 1 rope length and then Victoria or whoever goes first, the second person comes up and meets you up there. And then you're going up again, you're meeting up again. So you're basically just kind of leapfrogging up to the top. And this gives you pitch by pitch directions of like exactly what it's going to do. This is a 140-foot 5 easy pitch that splits into 4 sections, starts in a wide dihedral chimney system and goes up about 20 feet to a big ledge and continues past a bulge. I wouldn't say it was 5 easy personally. But that's kind of where like reading the comments really comes in handy, you know, or getting some more opinions, because usually the description and, you know, different things like that were written like years ago. And there's been a lot of updates in the comments that you'll find more recently, but it is nice to just know like which way you're heading or what direction does the climb go, different things like that. So we spend a ton of time studying these descriptions and just making sure like we have them memorized, and then we forget anyways. So we bring our phones up on the climb and we can just pull it up. But yeah, study the descriptions, then the descent, like I said, but again, the comments really come in handy. I can't guarantee you're gonna not see anything inappropriate in these comments, but sometimes you come across that. But yeah, it's just people will give you helpful beta, like awesome route. This is my first desert tower. We did the approach in the dark and it took us an hour. So yeah, we're just always going through, like, the more information you can get for a big adventure, in my opinion, is like the better. You know, you can't have too much information when you're going to a place that probably doesn't have cell service and you're doing a big climb. And yeah, the more you can know, the better. So yeah, we're reading everything on this tab here.
Yeah, and I agree with that philosophy for basically everything. Is like, you know, I love using Onyx for a central hub for like my action plan. But when it comes to gathering beta, like there's nowhere I won't look, whether that be
Oh,
asking a
yeah.
friend who's done it, whether that be watching YouTube videos, whether that be like, you know, buying a physical guidebook, or reading blogs, you know, like I am a over preparer, I think, but like I think when you're doing something this gnarly, it never hurts to come prepared.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially like on a route like this too, you know, it's 5.9 plus is like supposed to be not that hard, but once you dig into the comments and the guidebooks and things, people will tell you like it's pretty hard. It's what they call old school, so it's, you know, a little bit run out, a little bit sketchy, like probably harder than 5.9. So yeah, all of that information is good to know, and that's part of the reason why first time we were hoping to climb it, we actually bailed because we started reading all the comments and we're like, like maybe it's a little bit too out of our wheelhouse.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And we felt like we didn't have the right gear to do the climb at the time. We ended up buying a number 5, and that came in handy when we did the climb
yeah,
6 months later.
yeah, we did end up placing it. So yeah, just again, this was like we were planning this for 6 months basically, just like making sure we had all the gear, making sure we know where we were going, and like also just practicing our skills, right? Because we weren't like big chimney climbers and stuff like that. So that was things that we could work on after having read all the beta and the guidebooks and stuff like that, and watching a ton of videos. It's nice when you're doing a climb that you think is maybe going to be like pretty hard to like watch somebody else do it. It just gives you a better perspective on that climb.
Yeah, and
But
I really agree with your perspective there too, with just like also having the ability to back down when you're not prepared. Like climbing is one of those sports that like the worst feeling is when you're like up high and you're not, you know,
Oh,
you don't
yeah.
have the gear you need, you're not quite making through the move, you were unprepared for something. So like I personally am always in like the like knowing what I'm getting myself into. So like
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those like, you know, if on Castleton too, like bailing is kind of iffy. Like you can bail, but on a bunch of other climbs, it's like you must go up, kind of. So yeah, that's something you need to be prepared for too. Is like if you think you might have to bail, then that's something you need to look into and plan for that. So, and then of course, you know, I got the pictures pulled up here too. So I think there was one here. Beware of the honey badger guarding the north face wraps. Things like that. Like you never know. Like there's just good information and like funny information too, but it's all on here. This is actually a perfect photo of like the actual climb itself. I mean, you start down here, you scramble up into this chimney, and like right here is the top of the first pitch. And then you're just kind of following the corner the rest of the way. Top of the second pitch, top of the third pitch here, and then you scramble up and climb the face to the very top. So yeah, something like this. I mean, it says view of the route here. It's like it gives you a perfect photo. That way, you know, as soon as you get there, you know what you're looking for. So, but yeah, I mean, if there's any specific questions I can answer on that, let me know.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we will have a little Q&A at the end as well if you have other questions about the app and everything. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. Like this is totally one of my bucket lists too. And hopefully I can work my way up to it.
Yeah, if you need some beta, let us know for sure. It's fun.
Cool. All right, for the next section, I just want to show like how to get yourself ready for offline use and to make sure your phone is ready for the field. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, I saw a question come in. We'll answer that after this guy. All right, I'm sharing my screen. It'll kick in a second, hopefully. Cool. You can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Cool. All right, so this is the Onyx Backcountry app versus the web map that we've been showing. And it's got a very familiar experience to what we're just showing. Everything you can do on your, on your computer, you can do on your phone. And the beauty of it too is like if you're spending a lot of time on your computer marking waypoints and building routes and doing all this stuff, it automatically syncs with your Onyx account. So you don't even need to like move files around or anything like that. If you're in service and you boot up your phone, all of that stuff will just come directly over to, to your phone. So I'm just going to just zoom in on the castle and tower again. There it is. Oh, I just lost it. Castle and tower. So you can see like this is the route. This is where it is. Again, you can see it in 3D. And if you want to, oh, I kind of like lost myself there. But if you want to go into 3D mode, you can hit this 3D button down here in the corner. And then once you're in there, you can push both thumbs up and that'll like tilt. So you can start looking around like this and then you can start panning around. So like just getting reoriented, this is where we're going. This is what we're looking at. So the first thing I always do is get this thing real quick is in the bottom. Can you see my cursor too?
Yes.
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. So on the bottom, on the bar down there, you'll see that's the Discover tab that we were showing earlier. Offline maps, my content, tools, and tracker. So you want to make sure your offline maps are downloaded. This is the only way to guarantee that your phone will actually work for you and have the information you need when you're out of service. So if you click this and select new map, it'll allow you to like download an area. So like what you want to do here is make sure the entire area that you're going to be exploring in is encompassed within this map. So when I go to Moab, I actually have, here's my little pro tip, is I have this like old phone that was sitting in a drawer for a long time. And if you get that thing on Wi-Fi and go into Onyx and download a bunch of offline maps, it will work completely without cell service. So like you can have it turned off without a SIM card and you can use it as like a phone. Like I have one that I have just in my Jeep at all times. It's just loaded with Moab and a bunch of other areas that I'm always in. So I can like break it out and use it if I need to. So that's my pro tip.
That's a great pro tip.
And it's great for mountain biking too, if you don't want to smash your phone by having it fall off the handlebars or if you want to fall on it. So, or climb with it. I don't know. That's my pro tip. I'm going to do a pretty big swath of Moab since basically anytime you leave the downtown area, you lose cell service immediately because of all these canyons and rocks. So like I always like going a little bit broader with mine. You can change your download resolution. So if you just want like trails, you don't really mind too much about low, satellite imagery or whatever. You can do low. Medium is generally what I do for these larger areas. And if you really want to get granular, you can do a high resolution, but it takes up more space. So when you're in here and you start fixing your map, you can see like this is our download size, so almost a gig. And then I'm going to actually get it going. We're going to title it Moab. And then I'm going to let it download. So these are alphabetized, and I always make sure that before you leave cell service, you watch this thing download completely, which we'll give it another second or two to do. But yeah, like that's the number one thing with Onyx is just like you need to make sure that your maps are downloaded before you go off. And then once you're out of service, like you can flip between activity modes. You can change your layers. You can change from topo to satellite imagery, everything like that. That all works offline. So like basically you're getting pretty much everything when you download offline maps. And then the other thing I like to do when I go offline is up here, you can see there's this like go offline button. And what this does is it tells the app to stop using the internet. So I always obsessively check this like before I leave and just start zooming in and being like, okay, I can see the resolution that I hope, like I can see trees, I can actually get a clear picture when I'm like zooming in and out on the phone. And yeah, and that's the main thing I like to do with that. So a caveat with climbing too, and another like plug for like the interconnectivity between Mountain Project and Onyx is one of the things that doesn't come over in climb mode is the photos of the routes, because there's just like thousands and thousands of photos in these areas. So when you're in these areas too, like it doesn't hurt if you're referencing Mountain Project photos and like you need those like photos of where the routes go and everything like that when you're out of service. It never hurts to just download that section in Mountain Project as well, so you have that on the go. And then once you get both those downloaded, I also really like using this tracker functionality. So what this does is you turn this on and it'll actually draw a line behind you. I'm not going to zoom into my house, but as you start walking, it'll actually like leave like Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs behind you, so you know where you've been, and it keeps track of your metrics for future. So you can say like, how long did it take me to climb that approach trail? And you know, what was my elevation and everything like that, and your mileage. So I always like using that feature as well. It's a really good way to showcase that. And then if you click, I also like this feature. If you click this little crosshairs thing, it'll put a little like spotlight. So that way you like, you know, if you're at a fork in the road and you're like, is it right or left? You can kind of like point and be like, okay, we're going this way. So yeah. So that's all I have in terms of getting the app ready for use. And then we're going to go back in here. And we're going to go into Q&A in just a second, but I'll kind of finalize a little bit here. Again, like if you haven't downloaded Onyx Backcountry, now is a really good time. We're running a really great deal. So we have the 2 tiers, Premium and Elite. With Elite, you get you know, a recent imagery layer where you can see like if there's snow on the mountain peaks and stuff like that, as well as the private lands data. And we're working on a program to give you access to some great deals with partner brands, so you can get some good deals on climbing gear. We're working with like lodging options, so you can get discounts on like stays in cool places like Moab through Gravity Haas, as well as working on building like educational opportunities and other experiences into this program. So that's what you get with being Elite. And if you haven't entered this giveaway, now is a really great time. I'll be drawing the winners as soon as we finish the Q&A. So if you haven't gotten in here yet, scan this QR code and enter the giveaway, and we'll be drawing winners at the end. All right, let's move into the Q&A. If you have questions, pop them into the chat here. So we have one question is, what is your favorite beginner climbing books? Do you guys have any recommendations, Cody and Victoria?
Yeah, so actually the first book that we ever bought when we first started climbing is called Mountaineering Freedom of the Hills. And it has pretty much everything you could ever need from beginner level climbing all the way to advanced glacier travel climbing. It has like diagrams and pictures and a bunch of stuff. So we pretty much learned, I mean, a lot of what we know today from that book. So yeah, Mountaineering Freedom of the Hills.
Yeah, it's super good. It has like literally like how to set up a top rope all the way to like placing trad gear. It even has avalanche stuff in there. So it's just like, I mean, they call it the climbing Bible, because you literally can learn how to climb from that book. It's super good. So that's probably what we would recommend.
I got one like as a stocking stuffer growing up that was called The Complete Idiot's Guide to Rock Climbing. And like from my perspective with like not really knowing what I was doing, it was like a really interesting read at the time. I'm not sure how it holds up. I got to find it, but yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
And then also like, I love purchasing like the local guidebooks that you can find for your, like, I think that it not only gives good perspective on the routes, but also like the history of the climbing in your area, as well as like, you know, some of the current issues that are, you know, going on in your area as well. So, and it supports usually local people who wrote the book.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, the guidebooks they always come in clutch, yeah, for sure.
Okay. How do you guys train to improve specific climbing skills?
I think mainly we're focused on trad climbing right now. So it's, you know, basically you're climbing inside of a crack or, you know, weakness in the rock. And a lot of the times climbing gyms don't have cracks. So it's hard to train that, you know? So like say we wanted to climb off width, for example, which is our weakness. You can't really find an off width in the gym. So you have to go outside to find it. So, I mean, really it's just finding like a beginner climb that is fitting that style that we're looking to get better at. And that's
Totally.
pretty much been what we've been doing forever, is just going outside to climb.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times the gym doesn't really replicate an outdoor climb. So we're big advocates of just go outside and climb as much as you can.
Yeah, I think that's the ticket. Just climb a lot, you know, as much as you can. Start super small, you know, start easy, and like just very small increments every single time. So just, I think the best thing you can do is just climb a lot. Yeah, just as much as you can.
All right. We got another question from Curtis. Tips on route finding for more alpine style missions. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Onyx is a pretty good resource for that. I don't know if you guys have any advice for this one. But
Go ahead and say what you were gonna say.
I'm thinking of like Long's Peak and a handful of other like routes that are more alpine style and longer. Like if it exists in Mountain Project and those routes are there, like we've been working really hard to add more sophisticated information about like approaches to these areas as well. So like if it is like a longer, alpine climb, like let's say you're going to like Cirque of the Towers and you're planning a backpacking trip and a climbing trip, our app does a really good job of trying to like help you contextualize that. But yeah, do you have any other advice?
Yeah, so we climbed a climb called Matterhorn Peak.
I can pull it up if I can share my screen. Is that cool?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's see.
Cool.
So yeah, this is like one of the first alpine climbs that we did, but you can go ahead and
Yeah. So we did this last year, and funny enough, actually, we backpacked to this lake before, so we kind of knew where we wanted to. We kind of knew the trail already to get there, and we knew like where we wanted to camp for this alpine mission. But we pretty much just followed the trail for this climb, and then you have to go off trail at some point.
which is here.
Yeah.
I
And
don't
then
know if I
that's
can
when
see
we
your
did.
screen. Hold on. Can you try one more time? I feel like I can't see it. Is it just me? There you go. I can see it. Cool.
Back up now. Okay.
Okay, there you go.
So this is the area that we're talking about. So this peak here, I mark all my climbs with the carabiner waypoint. So yeah, this is where the climb is. The lake Victoria was referring to, I've marked with water and a campsite since that's where we camped. But yeah, so it's coming into it. We had, like Victoria was saying, we had gone here before just on like a backpacking trip. Oh, Matterhorn is exactly what I was asking for. Okay,
Oh,
cool.
perfect. Here you go. Here's a beta.
Here's the beta. That's perfect. So yeah, we had saw this before because when you camp right here and you're staring at this Matterhorn peak here. This is also a great beginner alpine climb, by the way. So good choice. But yeah, as far as like finding the route, if you didn't have any idea, to be honest, I'm just looking at this 3D map. I'm looking for like path of least resistance, basically, because there isn't really a trail. I mean, you can follow this Horse Creek Trail and it like eventually goes up, the hiker's route. But without that, there isn't really any, there's no trail to get to the base of the climb, basically. So I usually like to look at the 3D maps. It did help that we had been there before, so we kind of knew like what it looked like.
But I will say for this one specifically, there is a climber's trail to get to the lake.
There is a trail, so it goes through here. I tried to mark it. You can't really see it on the map. So this is where that like, drawing your own route comes in handy. But again, we had been there before, so I knew that like, okay, the trail kind of splits around here. And then I knew also that there was a bunch of switchbacks. Truthfully, it might be like more over right here, if I'm remembering correctly, but this just helped me kind of stay on track, when we're out there, knowing that like I want to be in this area. So yeah, we just drew this with the point draw.
And then to get to the base of Matterhorn, it was a lot of scrambling and just, again, finding path of least resistance. But what's nice with the 3D maps is you can kind of see where the start would be for Matterhorn based off of like photos that you see on Onyx or Mountain Project or whatever you're looking at. And you can kind of pinpoint exactly where the start might be for your climb.
Let me get that back here.
And that's awesome. That really just shows like the value of like kind of going off the beaten path with Onyx and just taking the reins and like building a route. So you can get a better estimate on like where you're going, what you're doing, where you're camping, and not having to just rely solely on a mountain project description of how far it is or how strenuous it is to even hike into one of these areas.
Right.
And so that's where like a lot of that research is going to come into, you know, watching videos, things like that. But like Victoria was saying, you know, you get the 3D maps and you can kind of tell where the climb is going to start just by looking at other photos and things that are on there as well. But yeah, as far as like finding the approach, I think the best thing is like, again, read the beta, read the comments. People will tell you like how to get there. You can look at the photos. Let's see. So we did this one.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, there will be like a photo that's telling you like this is where you start, which is, I think there's another one on here too that's pretty good. So yeah, this shows you like this is where you want to start, right? So that's basically I took that information, I went onto the 3D map here and I'm like, okay, I think we want to start right around here. And I think it got us within like 100 yards probably of the start of the climb. So
another good feature that I love on Onyx is the recent imagery. Especially in the Sierra right now this season, it's like, what does the snow look like out there? Like, am I going to need crampons and ice axe, or like, is the snow clear? So we definitely used the recent imagery when we did this mission. And it definitely.
You want to toggle that on really quick, just so we can show people? I forgot I haven't done that yet.
Layers.
It's in there, and then it's under preferred base map imagery. Yeah, and then do recent imagery. Yeah. So this is also an elite feature as well. So like if you're you know, into this one, this is one of my favorite layers as well. This comes with the elite tier. So we update this layer every 2 weeks. We have a 3D picture from space that shows you where the snow line is, and this is super useful for climbing, biking, everything. Like it feels like summer in lower valleys, but there's a lot of snow up high in a lot of places right now still. So this can
we're currently using this because we're trying to start planning our own alpine trips, and like as you can tell, there's still a ton of snow everywhere. So but yeah, so that's how we go about route finding for alpine climbs. Did you have anything else?
No.
Yeah, I mean, just again, I think the 3D map honestly is like the best thing because most of these alpine climbs, there's not going to be a trail. So you're just kind of looking for path of least resistance. And in this case, maybe like trying to find where does the snow not hold? You know, you're trying to like stay on the ridge lines and things like that. So
You're welcome.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there any other last minute questions before we wrap this up? I just lost my thing. Okay, now it's just Curtis again. Cool. Awesome. Well, I'm going to wrap this up for the web crowd. And then we're going to draw the winners. But for everyone who's tuning on YouTube, thank you for joining and see you later.